Hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Cioffi on this Friday. I want to start off with thanking Steve LaPointe for hitting Super Chat tonight. I really appreciate it very much. Cigar on the way home tonight for me. Alright, so we're going to start off, of course, we're going to be talking about the system that's going to be impacting the East Saturday into Saturday night. And, you know, one of the things I noticed today on my excuse me, on my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Cioffi, is there seems to be a lot of confusion regarding the fact that my forecast was much lower than what the Weather Service forecast was, and then came questions with justifications for the winter storm watch and whether it should have been put up or should not have put up. I'm going to address all this. I have my reasons for why I went less than the Weather Service, so why don't we just start off. I'm going to pull up the watches and warnings that are up at the moment. And we have right over the Northeast, we have a peppering of winter storm watches that are up from southern New England, from Rhode Island and southeastern Massachusetts. Looks like Boston clipped off some of the counties in Massachusetts from earlier. And the winter storm watches for all of Connecticut, all of Rhode Island, Long Island, southeastern New York, and for a change, it's along and south of Route 84 and not north of Route 84. Northern New Jersey, except for extreme eastern Monmouth County, it's all the counties in northern New Jersey, the northern half of New Jersey, north of Route 195, which basically cuts the state in half from east to west. And we have winter storm watches up for most of eastern Pennsylvania, except the northeast corner and the very southeast corner. And winter weather advisories have now gone up for south central Pennsylvania. And I imagine that there will be some other winter weather advisories going up over time. Out in the west, with the next storm coming in, we have winter weather advisories from southern Oregon and into northern California on northward, where they become winter storm warnings up, probably in the highest elevations, and there's a winter weather advisory up in northwestern Washington. And up there, they might have that up for 40 inches of snow expected. I don't know. Warnings right along the Washington-Canada border into northern Idaho, northwestern Montana, and then we've got some winter storm watches up for eastern Montana, advisories in the middle, watches up for parts of Wyoming and western South Dakota, easternmost Wyoming down into most of northern Utah, and advisories up this is all with a separate storm, obviously, that is out in the west. Okay, so let's discuss the issue. And here's the Weather Service forecast for New York, which they've actually lowered. They were going 6 to 8 for the North Shore of Long Island and for all of southern Connecticut. And they've kind of cut that back now. They went 4 to 6 for Long Island, 4 to 6 for northeastern New Jersey, and for the Hudson Valley. So basically, the entire area that's under a watch is forecast to get 4 to 6. The southeastern corner of Connecticut is the one spot that's left that's a little bit higher at 6 to 8. Now, further east, as we look at what Boston is doing, and we got them up over here. So we'll bring Boston up, and when I say what Boston is doing, the Boston office, which is responsible for the rest of Connecticut and Rhode Island and Massachusetts. So we have 4 to 6 throughout much of the state of Massachusetts all the way out to the west. And then we have 6 to 8 for southeastern Mass around Taunton, Plymouth, New Bedford, Providence in Rhode Island, Coventry 6 to 8, northeastern Connecticut 6 to 8, and then the numbers go down a bit as you move out toward Cape Cod, Hyannis 4 to 6, on up to Provincetown 3 to 4. So that is what Boston's idea is, and I'll pull up Mount Holly, PHI. And Mount Holly is, well, where are they? Where'd they go? Hello, Mount Holly. Let me try that again. PHI. Okay. I don't understand why I cannot get Mount Holly's up here. You know, it figures that this happens to me. Let me move me to the top. All right. I've somehow gotten myself caught in a box here. All right, so let's get rid of that. And we will, let me try it in this box. And PHI. Sorry for the delay, folks. There we go. So here's Mount Holly's forecast, which is for New Jersey and for most of eastern Pennsylvania. And they kind of moved things around here today. They went, they're going 4 to 6 for Sussex, but they've extended that 4 to 6 line southward to about 195. Coastal counties down through Monmouth and Southern Ocean, 2 to 3. Get to Atlantic City, it's less than an inch. 1 to 2 in southwestern New Jersey, and 3 to 4 once you go south of Trenton into western Burlington County. 4 to 6 though across into Bucks County on the other side. Philadelphia's got 3 to 4. Wilmington 2 to 3. Georgetown in eastern Maryland at 1 to 2. So you see the forecast range that the Weather Service did. Now here's what I did, okay, which was decidedly different. I've actually nudged my amounts up a bit in a few places, because of what the models were doing last night and today. But I'm going for 1 to maybe as much as 3 inches for the coastal areas of Long Island and coastal New Jersey. And I think where the confusion came in for a lot of places was the fact that I was going 1 to 3 for Long Island while the Weather Service was going for 6 to 8. And the reason behind that is that I'm trying to respect the borderline atmosphere that exists in terms of temperatures. I think what the Weather Service did was that they looked at the NAM last night, overnight, especially the 0Z run last night, which comes out, starts coming out a little bit before 9 o'clock Eastern time, and we'll be live streaming that tonight on Facebook with my colleague Joe Rayo beginning at 9:15, so we'll get the new NAM out. But they saw the NAM last night, which was as aggressive as the run from yesterday afternoon. It's kind of come off a little bit from that, but not a lot. And they forecasted with, I think, using that and a few other short-range models like the WRF and a couple of others. The problem is, in my view, is that, you know, I like to respect the NAM. I think the NAM does very well, and I know how to use it. And you know, it's a concern to me because of the fact that the NAM, when you look at the temperature profile of the atmosphere from Philadelphia to LaGuardia and probably along most of the interior parts of Long Island, north and west, the temperatures are going to be at or below freezing at the critical levels between 0 and 5,000 feet. It would argue that precipitation should be all snow, even for coastal areas. The RGEM, although the RGEM was a little bit colder this afternoon, but particularly the GFS, you know, the GFS wants to bring that mix, that rain-snow line just to the north of the coast. So basically, you know, I just did not feel comfortable biting the bullet if I had seen one of the global models last night come in cold enough where it matched the NAM. I think I would have felt better about going higher, but that didn't happen, and it really didn't happen today. The late afternoon GFS was maybe a shade colder, but not enough. So, you know, I'm gonna probably stick with what I have unless I'm given a good reason to go up. Now, just inland of the coast, and I mean just barely inland, you know, I've got this large area of 3 to 5 inches. I also did go under the Weather Service where they have the winter storm watches up through Connecticut, Rhode Island. Now, it would seem to me that this would be a more likely, you know, this is going to be all snow north and west of this blue line that I've drawn, the light blue line, and I have all of southern New England in snow with no mixing issues or rain issues, but you know, I'm trying to be careful here. The models are generating as little as 2 to 4 tenths of liquid in some of the areas north and west of the coast. Some of them are generating 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch of liquid. If that happens, you'll get your 4 to 6 and 6 to 8. But you know, there's too many conflicts here in terms of trying to make the forecast. So this is my best guess, okay? And I think it's pretty obvious that there are big variables here, and maybe bigger than usual, because of the fact that that freezing line is oh so close to the coast, that these numbers could possibly go up or they possibly could go down. So I'm hoping that everyone indulges me with a little bit of wiggle room here to go on either side. The other issue is, by the way, remains, in my view, what happens when this storm system moves off the coast. Because once it starts to form along the North Carolina coast, and then once it's off the Delaware coast, it is going to deepen fairly rapidly for 6 hours, right at the time that it's going to be impacting the area that I've described. And that is going to mean for precipitation that's going to pretty much explode right overhead. And hey, if you get that development, you could easily put down those accumulations without any problem at all. You will get the amounts forecast that I have, certainly, and maybe what the Weather Service has. But if that's a little slow on the uptake, then you might have a problem. So here's the GFS. We'll start with that. And this is right now, okay, with the front that's moved through. And here's tomorrow, late afternoon and evening. Now, for the first time, the GFS is actually showing snow over Long Island tomorrow evening. You can see it's mostly snow except in the southern third of New Jersey, all of Pennsylvania down into Maryland. There's actually a little bit of cold air that's damming back from the high that's going out to the east in what we refer to as the bad high position. If the high was up in Maine someplace, maybe, or in New Hampshire and just kind of wedging down the Appalachians, it would be a different story. But cold air is trying to dam, and a lot of times the global models have a very difficult time. The NAM has a better handle on these cold air damming situations in general. So this is another reason why you could argue that the atmosphere right along the immediate coast, in and around New York City, Long Island, and through the northern half of New Jersey, even south of the Turnpike down to 195 or a little bit further south, could be more snow than anything else. Now here it is at 1 a.m. and there's your low, that patch of yellow. That's that heavy, some heavy precip that's out in the ocean, but your low center is actually fairly far to the south. If you had a little bit more cold air, this would be sort of a no-brainer. But you have to deal with the cards that you're played with, and we don't exactly have a ton of cold air to play around. Notice that rain snow line on the GFS is just runs just north and west of New York City, just north and west of I-95 on through Connecticut. And of course, by Sunday morning, the low is already way out. You see it here. This precip is probably would have already ended by about 4 or 5 a.m. and maybe just coming to an end along coastal New England. We could now switch to the NAM, and the darker blues would be indicative of heavier snows, and this is tomorrow evening at 7 a.m. The low center, if I can just make this a little narrower, you can see the low center is just sitting just northeast of the North Carolina coast, and from here, this is where the pressure drops 12 millibars in 6 hours. So that's where you get your explosive deepening. So this is an hour-by-hour look, by the way. So this large area of dark blue is probably moderate snow of about an inch or so an hour, and the darker blue along the New Jersey coast there could be maybe a burst of 2 inches an hour. And by 9 p.m., it's that moderate snow area over New Jersey and Long Island. The NAB keeps it cold. It never brings that rain inland, okay? And the thing is, you almost always get your band of heaviest snows right near the rain-snow line. So if the rain-snow line gets to just off the south shore of Long Island, there's going to be some heavy snows that will fall over Long Island and southeastern New York, northeastern New Jersey, and into southern Connecticut. There's your low by 1 a.m. It's deepened from a pressure of 1020 to 1008, and then it moves on out to the northeast, so that by 7 a.m. the snow's already ended even in Boston. So this is the NAM's view. The NAM's snowfall through all of this, and you can see there's a cutoff. It doesn't give that much to Boston here. You got to go down into southeastern Mass and over into Rhode Island, and you get some 4 or 5 inch amounts there. It actually wants to argue that the heaviest snows will be in southeastern Pennsylvania and then into central New Jersey, mainly west of the Garden State Parkway. So, that's where how the NAM sees this. And by the way, it does extend some decent snow amounts down to the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area for what it's worth. It's got this 4-inch plus band that goes down into Virginia. I don't know whether that's going to be the case or not, but it's interesting that it did that. The 3-kilometer NAM has a very bullish view of 6-inch plus snows from southeastern Pennsylvania across central and almost all of northern New Jersey, southeastern New York, all of Long Island, all of southern New England, down through almost all of Connecticut, certainly all of Connecticut south of Route 84, and southeastern Massachusetts, with lesser amounts as you go north and west. One of the things that the 3-kilometer NAM does is that it just really kind of goes wild with the precipitation development. The model responding to those rapid pressure falls, strong lift, strong vertical motion. You can see those very dark blue radar echoes. This is what the NAM3 sees as its representation of the radar for this is at 10 p.m. tomorrow night, and those dark blues are probably very heavy snows. And look at these very dark blues over Long Island at this point, between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. Till midnight and 1 a.m. So it snows. It would suggest that it snows heavily at maybe an inch or two an hour for about 3 or 4 hours. Bear in mind, with the temperatures as close to freezing as it is, the snow ratios here are probably going to be maybe 8 to 1, and maybe even a little bit lower than that. So it may not necessarily translate that half an inch of snow will wind up producing 5 or 6 inches of snow, but instead may wind up only producing 3 or 4, or closer maybe to the 4 than the 3. But the point is that it's going to be a very heavy, wet snow, I think, that will fall if this is correct. And then that heavy snow travels across southern Connecticut, Rhode Island, and into southeastern Mass based on the NAM3. But the RGEM model, which usually is pretty good, the RGEM was a little bit colder today on a late afternoon run, because it does actually started to snow over Long Island, but it still brings that snow rain line just over Long Island. New York City in snow, southeastern New York, southern Connecticut, all in snow, but it puts Long Island in rain, okay? And we're talking literally about a handful of miles here. The RGEM did shift a little bit further to the south, so I want to see that happen again tonight on tonight's run. If it does that, and maybe if the GFS can give me a little bit of room, then maybe I'll nudge amounts up. But you got to be really careful here because of the fact that we have such a limited amount of cold air that we're dealing with. Interestingly enough, even though the GFS does change it over to rain over a large area, when you look at the model, what's called the MOS, the Model Output Statistics, which is basically the model's forecast for temperatures, wind, down at the surface, visibility, precipitation type, and snowfall accumulation. Interestingly enough, the model MOSs for the GFS have snow as the precipitation type for almost all areas, including coastal areas, even though the map would suggest that there would be a change over to rain. So again, just to bring it back up, I'll bring up my forecast again. You can check out this on meteorologistjoecioffi.com, and you can check out also all the National Weather Service snow forecast maps from Virginia to New England. If you look on the menu and just click on, I believe where it says winter, and click on snow forecast, you can get it all on one page. But this is what I'm going for now. 1 to 3 along the immediate coast, maybe right on the very immediate shore. It may be a slushy inch, and then the amounts jump up to 3 to 5 inches in this large area, covering much of southern Pennsylvania and eastern Pennsylvania, much of central and northern New Jersey, except maybe for the coastal areas. The amounts skew down as you go south, of course. I have Washington just south of the 1 to 3 inch zone, and I have Baltimore, I believe I have Baltimore in the 1 to 3 inch zone, and then you go up into north central Maryland, south central PA, we're talking 3 to 5 inches, and up into northern West Virginia and into the western part of Maryland as well. So that's what I'm thinking here with regards to the local snowfall. Now, I want to just touch on the long range real quick because we've got some interesting developments. I'm going to bring up the Teleconnections because you've got the Teleconnections showing the NAO, the North Atlantic Oscillation, getting strongly negative in about 6 days. We've got the bar actually on the NAO is not that positive as it is, and it's kind of trending down this weekend, kind of a little bit of a bump up early next week, and then it crashes down to strongly negative. These are the strongest negative readings on the NAO that I've seen, I think, since back in November. And the East Pacific Oscillation, which is negative here, that would normally mean, some cold here in the east. To offset, the positive NAO, it would suggest that the cold shots will be in and out. Also, rather negative. Then it kind of trends to neutral as the NAO goes negative, and then it starts to drop negative again. But the real huge problem is the Pacific North America Index, which measures the strength of ridges and troughs in the Northwest, off the Pacific coast, and also the strength of the trough in the eastern part of the United States, if there is one. And you can see here, you are about as far away from a trough in the east and a ridge in the west than you will ever be. Normally, these indices sit in a zone between plus 200 and minus 200. We are seeing them, the PNA, getting down to minus 600. I have to tell you, watching this on and off for a long time, I don't ever remember seeing an index this far negative, pointing to the state of the atmosphere. And this is a problem for you winter weather lovers going forward, is that even though it does trend up, it is so deeply negative that it's still strongly negative back at the end of the forecast period. You got to get that PNA to go positive. This is the problem with this blocking pattern that's developing, in that the Pacific is not cooperating, and until that changes, it's going to be problematic. You're going to have to, the only way, I'm not going to say that it's impossible to get additional snow events going into March. I think it is possible. Certainly we're seeing this weekend with upper air conditions that are not very favorable at all, and somehow we're managing to deal with a snow event. You can have it happen, but you got to have everything just perfect. If you don't have everything just perfect, you're going to have a problem. And this is, I think this is going to be the case. This may wind up being the case with this blocking pattern we're getting into, because with the Pacific in such, let's call it disrepair, you're not going to be able to do this. Now, let me show you what the upper air. Remember, we've been saying this ridge in the Gulf of Alaska has got to break down and get out of the way. The blocking will develop. If you watch the upper air here as we move into next week and beyond, you're going to see this upper air storm that's sitting near Greenland gradually drops. Part of it's going to drop southward, and you can see this big storm that forms out in the Atlantic. So you get this blocking signature here. You've got the blocking high fingering its way over the top, over Greenland, and trying to move into northeastern Canada. There's even a fairly powerful system being indicated here in the east of the upper atmosphere, but you've got this problem in the west with this deep trough along the west coast. You want a ridge here. You don't want a trough, you want a ridge. And if you had one, then that would make this system in the east that's being indicated probably a big snowstorm threat. But you can't have it when you've got a deep trough like that in the west. You've got this ridge along 160. You need a deep trough near 160 so that the ridge could build up closer to or just inland of the west coast. Until that gets until you get rid of that, you're going to have a problem. Now, as we get to the end of the period, which basically happens every time we watch these model runs, it always looks much better at the end of the period. When you get to the end of the period, which is now March 4th, and remember the clock's ticking here, it's starting to tick now. When you get to March 4th, you start to see a slightly better looking upper air. You start to get height rises in the Pacific Northwest. The ridge starts to build up there. The trough moves off the west coast. You've got this low sitting over Newfoundland, so there's a flow of colder air into the eastern part of the United States. Big blocking high over Greenland. The ridge that was in the Gulf of Alaska has now moved to the western Aleutians and almost lines up right along 180 west along the date line. So at the end of the period, but that's over 2 weeks from now. That's a long time to wait. Now I want to show you what all of this implies for Europe, because this was pretty interesting when I saw this today. Because Europe is going to experience, if this holds in the long range, it's going to get cold, okay? And I want you to watch the anomalies. I'm going to put up the temperature anomalies here over Europe. If this verifies, they're going to see some very cold weather with temperatures 20 or more degrees below average. But at least initially, there's not too much happening here. You've got some pulses of cold air that come down from time to time. You can see this visible toward the end of next week. But watch this large area. Look on the right side, and you see those purple, that big area of purple of much below normal temperatures over Siberia. And watch what happens as we move into the second week of the long range. That area of bitter cold air just spreads westward into Western Europe and dives southwestward into Italy and France and eastern Spain. I mean, this is really cold air here that we're talking. The temperature anomalies in Italy, for example, at certain points in this purple shading, that's in centigrade, by the way. So we're talking 12 to 20 degrees below average centigrade. All right, that's 30 or more degrees below average Fahrenheit. And when I looked at some of the actual air temperatures that the models were forecasting, they were showing temperatures in the teens down into parts of southern Italy. This is quite the cold shot. Very, very cold in England and Ireland with this, through Scandinavia. And this is coming from Siberia and backing in from the east. It's not coming down from Greenland or from the northwest. It's actually backing in from Siberia and coming back westward. So that is the effect of that big block that's developed. It's east base, and it opens the door for cold air from Siberia to just come in toward the last days of February and into the first part of the month of March. So very interesting how the blocking pattern, how it affects both sides of the Atlantic the way it does. Learning an awful lot just kind of watching this on a daily basis, which up until I started doing these live streams, I didn't get to do very much. So hang on one second. Some of you may see a brief commercial break, and otherwise I'm gonna run through some of your questions. So I hope that at least clears up why I did what I did, and why there might be some confusion in terms of the forecast. This is one of the reasons why I don't like to change forecasts every 6 hours, okay, based on runs of models, because of the fact that it just makes it confusing. And that's another thing I did see today quite a bit of was people telling me their app said this or their app said that. They always forget to tell me exactly where they were geographically, but then 6 hours later the app would say something else. It's got to be very frustrating if you're looking for a forecast that's going to change every 6 hours. Okay, and I just don't think I don't think that's fair to you as a weather forecast consumer. I think you need, it doesn't serve you well to get a forecast that's changing 4 times a day. It shouldn't need to change that much. Anthony Orr doesn't want to give me any wiggle room. I need to know everything and have everything down to the exact number. You mean that I need to give everybody an exact flake count of how much snow is going to fall in a 1 square foot area on the side of their house next to the mailbox? Joshua Pan, do you point out about the NAO is not necessary for cold and snow weather, and it doesn't guarantee storms? When the negative NAO comes into play, it can overpower other oscillations and magnify. It can, depending on the circumstances. See, one of the disadvantages we have is when we just look at the indexes alone, it's not enough. We need to see where the troughs and ridges are, and you've got to remember that the measurement of the NAO, the North Atlantic Oscillation, the EPO, the East Pacific Oscillation, the PNA, the Pacific North America Index, covers a very large geographic area, and how the numbers are calculated in terms of the change in pressure. Well, if one area that's creating the greater change, for example, is further east, it might mean that the trough positions in other places are further east or further west, or perhaps not as strong, or perhaps stronger, and these all have impact in terms of the actual forecast. So remember, I say you could have these indices in your favor all you want. If the troughs and ridges are in the wrong place, it's not going to do you any good. Okay, you certainly are not going to have any nor'easters in a pattern where you've got a ridge in the east, obviously, and you got to get that the biggest problem in my view going into March is going to be that PNA. If you can't at least get that back up toward the neutral line, you're going to have a really tough time trying to get another system here in the east, and the only way it's going to happen is if you have things lining up just perfectly, something like what's happening for Saturday. And you know what? We don't even know what the outcome of that is. So we're going to have to wait to see what the outcome of that is on Saturday, and at least then we can say, okay, this system produced X amount of snow. We did it with marginal cold air. One of the other things that's really helping this, by the way, with respect to the system for tomorrow night, the other critical issue, which I neglected to mention earlier, was the fact that strengthening of that low pinches off the warm air that normally would be coming in off the ocean. So that's another reason why that low needs to intensify as fast as it does, because it's going to then cut off the warm air. So these are all these little pieces to the puzzle. Shelly Man Studios, as far as temperatures, once we get through this storm, unlike most systems that affect the east, there's usually cold air behind it. There actually is no cold air behind this one. The atmosphere is actually warming to the west of here, so we're going to see temperatures head up into the 50s. And since I did mention that on my description, let me just bring back the temperatures here. I'm going to go to the east, and we'll go to the 2-meter temperatures. That's at the end of the period, by the way, where you see that below normal area in the east. But let's go to the 2-meter temperatures, and we'll go to the first day, which is right now. Whoops, that wasn't supposed to happen. Okay, so, and you know what, let me get me out of the way. And when we move into next week, you see where all the cold air is up in Minnesota and on up through the Dakotas. So we are now at Monday. This is Monday afternoon at 1 p.m. You've got 50 back to about New York City. Now look at Tuesday. You've got 60s and you got 70s moving their way up through the Carolinas and into Virginia and also into parts of the Ohio Valley. Mid-70s across Kentucky and Tennessee. Your cold air is back west of the Mississippi in the western lakes and on up through the northern plains, because you know what? Your ridges here in the east, your trough is out in the west. And we're still warm on Wednesday, 60s to near 70. Cold fronts coming through, and then later in the week we kind of get back closer to average, but actually still a little bit above average toward the end of the week. But at least it's back to something that resembles normal. Just real quick too, before I run out of time, because I'm going to have to go do a broadcast shortly, I want to just go back and show you the weather for most of this week, the weekend and the week coming up for the rest of the U.S., because we have snow in the northwest. We've got some rain. Actually, a little finger of rain might be moving right over Amarillo during tonight into Saturday. So maybe that breaks their consecutive the streak of no measurable rainfall. More snow up in the Pacific Northwest on Sunday. You see a breakaway system moves into the plains. That starts the process of bringing that very warm air into the east. The transition will bring some showers here with a warm front Monday night into Tuesday. Then we've got some snow back through the plains and on up into the western lakes. And there's a cold front here that's approaching the east coast on Thursday. More action comes into the Pacific Northwest, and then weather conditions start to return back to average late next week and maybe into next weekend. So I will be live streaming with Joe Rayo at 9:15, roughly 9:15 Eastern time. So that is in about 54 minutes on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Cioffi. And you can, of course, pay attention tomorrow, because I will be live streaming tomorrow. Perhaps I may do it twice tomorrow. I'll do one early in the day. I'll have to let you know about the time. Just watch on the channel page. I'll put the clock up so you can see what time my next live stream is going to be. But I'll likely try and do 2 live streams tomorrow on YouTube. One early in the day before precipitation gets underway, just to sort of give a final forecast, and then perhaps tomorrow night, once the snow is underway, and we'll do a little nowcasting with that. Also, if you need more, just go to meteorologistjoecioffi.com, and there are my website posts there. Thank you, Steve LaPointe, for hitting Super Chat tonight. Really appreciate it very much. Had a nice size audience tonight. Thank you all for being here. Just want to let you know, if you shop on Amazon, if you link to Amazon from my website, Jeff Bezos, the chairman and CEO of Amazon, will give me a couple of cigars for that. So it's a easy way to say thank you. It doesn't cost you a dime to do it, a dime extra. If you're making normal purchases on Amazon, if you just do it through my link on my page, you I'll get a small percentage back. Amazon will give me back a couple of percent, and it all adds up, and I can get some coffee, some cigars. I'll need some new fishing lures, etc., etc. So thank you very much, though. I really appreciate you all being here and your generosity. It is very, very kind. So look for me tomorrow. Facebook at 9:15 tonight. Look for me tomorrow. We'll try one early in the day and try one again tomorrow night. Have a great Friday evening. Stay safe, folks, if you're traveling, and see you on Saturday.